Rain threatened for 3 days and never fell. The city waited under that unfinished weather. Shopkeepers looked up from their counters whenever the wind changed. Students carried umbrellas they never opened. Laundry hung limp from balcony rails, damp enough to smell of soap and concrete. Kai began to understand how a sky could become a lesson. Pressure gathered. Nothing broke. Everyone kept moving beneath it anyway. The sky stayed low over the city, turning the school windows gray and the sidewalks silver. People complained about the damp, about headaches, about laundry that refused to dry. Kai listened to all of it with a strange gratitude. Ordinary complaints meant ordinary time was still passing. He collected those complaints the way Mina collected notes. The math teacher grumbled about chalk sticking to her fingers. The security guard at school blamed his knee on the weather. Ryan claimed the air had personally sabotaged his hair, which Mina said required the air to care far more than seemed likely. Kai laughed, and for half a breath the world became only school, friends, and bad weather. Han began training him before dawn. Before dawn changed the city. The streets to the tea shop were not empty, but they belonged to different people: delivery drivers, cleaners, bakers lifting shutters, nurses coming off night shifts with pale faces and silent shoes. Kai walked those streets with his hood up and his phone in his hand, sending the required check-in message before he reached the back alley. Every morning, Mina replied with a single dot to confirm she was awake. Every morning, Ryan replied something less useful and somehow still reassuring. Not the dramatic training Kai's fear had imagined. There were no secret chambers, no ancient weapons, no blazing displays of power. Han placed a candle on the floor of the tea shop's back room, told Kai to sit, and made him breathe until his knees ached. Borrowed breath hides a flare, Han said. It is a hand over a lamp. Useful for a moment. Useless if you must walk through a dark street with someone watching. Kai kept his eyes on the flame. Then what am I learning? How to become less interesting. That was so far from what Kai expected that he opened one eye. Han almost smiled. Predators notice the loud, the hungry, the frightened, and the proud. Your ember makes you loud. Your fear makes you louder. We begin there. The technique Han taught him was called veiled flame. It did not feel like power. It felt like folding a blanket around a cup of hot tea without spilling it. Every breath tucked heat inward. Every exhale softened the edges of his awareness until the ember stopped pressing against his skin. The first lesson was not to hide from himself. Han made that clear after Kai tried to crush the ember flat and nearly made himself sick. A covered flame still needs air, Han said. Smothering is not concealment. Panic is not discipline wearing a serious face. Kai hated how often Han could insult him by describing exactly what he had done. The first attempt lasted 17 seconds. 17 seconds felt long until Han told him to try while standing. Then it lasted 8. When Han told him to walk across the room, it lasted 3 and ended with Kai bumping his shin against a crate because he was concentrating so hard on being calm that he forgot floors contained objects. Lena watched from the doorway and said nothing, which was worse than laughing. The second made him dizzy. The third failed because Ryan knocked on the back door and whispered, "Is he glowing yet?" loudly enough for half the shop to hear. Kai's veil snapped like a thread pulled too hard. Heat flashed under his skin, not dangerous but obvious to every person in the room who knew what to look for. Han closed his eyes for one long second. Kai expected anger. Instead the old instructor pointed toward the floor cushion. Again. That was almost worse. Anger would have ended the attempt. Again meant failure was part of the lesson. Lena opened the door and stared at him until his shoulders dropped. You are early. I was told to be useful. Then start by being quiet. Ryan obeyed for nearly 4 minutes, which Mina later called a personal record. They were not supposed to all meet every morning, but after the second day the pattern formed anyway. Mina brought photocopies and used a corner of the back room to compare old city maps. Ryan ran errands for Lena, badly at first, then with surprising speed. Kai trained under Han's eye until sweat gathered at his temples from the effort of appearing calm. No one announced that the back room had become theirs for an hour each morning. It happened by accumulation. Mina claimed the crate nearest the wall because the light was best there. Ryan learned which tins Lena wanted moved and which shelves were too old to lean on. Kai learned the particular creak in the floorboard beside the kettle and used it as an anchor when his attention began to drift. The room filled with small rolls until none of them felt like visitors. The system marked the progress in small, unsatisfying increments. Veiled flame proficiency, basic. Stable duration, 2 minutes. Warning, emotional disruption breaks concealment. Emotional disruption, Kai muttered during a break. Great. I'll just stop having those. He said it while wiping sweat from his face with a towel that smelled faintly of tea leaves. His body had done less movement than a normal workout and somehow felt more tired. Holding veiled flame was like keeping his expression neutral while every part of him argued in different directions. Fear wanted readiness. Pride wanted progress. Shame wanted secrecy. The technique required him to hear all three and feed none of them. Mina looked up from her papers. That is not how people work. The system likes impossible homework. Ryan set a crate of tea tins down with a thud. Then practice on me. I'm emotionally disruptive. Lena glanced at the crate. Carefully disruptive. Those tins cost money. Ryan shifted the crate an inch away from the table as if it had suddenly become sacred. Mina's mouth twitched. Kai felt the veil wobble again and stared at the candle until the laugh passed through him without breaking anything. If you want us to keep making more stories like this, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Azure Inkblade. Now, back to the chapter. Accurate, Mina said. Han, to Kai's surprise, agreed. So Ryan spent the next session trying to break Kai's concentration without touching him. He whispered insults. He recited wrong historical facts until Mina twitched. He described increasingly unlikely versions of Kai's tragic secret life as a haunted prince of abandoned construction sites. Kai lost the veil every time he laughed. At first that embarrassed him more than losing it to fear. Fear felt like a worthy enemy. Laughter felt ridiculous. But Han made him repeat the exercise until Kai began to notice the difference between laughter that burst outward and amusement he could let settle warmly behind his ribs. It was not about becoming cold. It was about not letting every feeling become a signal fire. Han did not scold him for it. Good. Now you know joy can make noise too. That sentence stayed with Kai longer than the failures. He thought of it at school when Ryan made a face behind their history teacher and Kai nearly choked on a laugh. He thought of it when Mina found a source she liked and her whole expression brightened before she hid it behind seriousness. Joy made noise too. That did not make joy dangerous. It meant joy deserved discipline as much as fear did. On the third afternoon, Mina found something useful and frightening in equal measure. She waited until they were all in the back room, then placed 3 maps side by side. One showed the ruins. One showed old water channels under the district. One showed a survey of fault lines beneath the city. She had drawn red dots over each map, then connected them with thread stolen from Lena's repair drawer. The result looked like a student's craft project until Kai leaned closer and saw how many of the dots matched. Mina's fingers were ink-stained. Her eyes had the sharp, sleepless brightness she got when a problem finally admitted it had a spine. The stones are not only aligned with the sky, she said. They sit over intersections underground. Water, pressure, old bedrock. Whoever placed them was stabilizing something below the city. Kai leaned closer despite himself. Stabilizing like repairing? Or containing? The word took the air out of the room. Repairing had sounded difficult but generous. Containing sounded like a lid held down by people who were no longer present to explain what was underneath. Kai looked at the fault line map and imagined the city above it, schools, apartments, tea shops, train stations, bakeries with warm buns in the window. All that ordinary life resting on old decisions buried below the streets. The room went quiet. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. I hate when the smart answer is worse. Mina pointed to a set of dates penciled in the margin. The large alignments repeat roughly every 600 years. There are records around the last one. Fires. Tremors. Whole streets abandoned after sinkholes opened. The accounts are messy, but the pattern is there. Kai felt the ember answer, a low pulse beneath his breastbone. Veiled flame thinned around it. Han's hand touched the table once, not loudly, but enough to ground him. The sound was small and wooden. It did what a shout would not have done. Kai found the table edge with his eyes, then the candle, then Mina's ruler lying across the maps. Particular things. Present things. The ember wanted the grand shape of danger. Han pulled him back to the room where danger could be handled one breath at a time. Breathe, Han said. Kai breathed. The heat tucked inward again. How long until the next alignment? Lena asked. Mina swallowed. About 6 months. 6 months should have sounded like time. It did not. It sounded like a door at the end of a hallway. Kai had wasted 6 months before without noticing. 6 months could vanish into school terms, rent notices, weather changes, and ordinary exhaustion. Now it became a measure with teeth. Too far away to justify panic. Too close to ignore. Mina looked at her own numbers as if hoping they would rearrange themselves into a kinder answer. Han studied the maps. Then our first task is not to solve 600 years of history. It is to keep the children in this room alive through the next week. Ryan opened his mouth. Lena lifted one finger. He closed it. Kai would have laughed if the maps had not been lying between them like a quiet accusation. Still, Han's words pulled the room back to the ground. 1 week. Roots. Practice. Sleep. Food. The humble things fear tried to skip. Lena added one more, records. If something changed, they would write it down. If someone watched them, they would note when and where. If Kai felt a new pull, he would describe it before turning it into action. Memory is arrogant under stress, she said. Paper is less dramatic. Mina wrote that down immediately, perhaps because it sounded like something she had always believed. That night, Kai wrote the plan on a page and taped it inside his closet door where only he would see it. Train before dawn. School as normal. No fence. No unknown contact alone. Tell Han if watched. Tell Mina before making assumptions. Let Ryan help without turning him into a weapon. The last line took the longest to write. He wrote it once, scratched it out, then wrote it again more plainly. Let Ryan help without turning him into a weapon. Ryan would hate the sentence if he saw it. That did not make it less true. Kai trusted Ryan's courage. He was learning to be careful with it. The system appeared when he capped the pen. Support structure strengthened. Chi circulation stable, 18 of 30. Recommendation, continue controlled growth. Controlled growth felt painfully slow. It also felt like the first sensible instruction the system had given him all week. Slow did not mean still. That was the part Kai had to keep relearning. The rain outside grew from a whisper to a steady sound against the windows. Nothing in the room leapt forward. Nothing solved itself. Yet the maps were copied, the plan was taped inside his closet, the ember sat quieter beneath his ribs, and the people who knew the truth knew a little more of it than they had yesterday. Outside, the rain finally began. Kai stood in the dark and listened until the city smelled clean.